I'm Julie Zenner. Denny has the night off, and here's what's coming up on Almanac North. We'll talk with Wisconsin State Senator Janet Bewley about her decision not to run for re-election. We'll have a report on efforts at UMD's Swenson College to promote an inclusive, diverse, and equitable program in the College of Science and Engineering. And Voices of the Region features Marshall Helmberger from the Timberjay News and Tower. These stories and more are coming up on Almanac North. Hello and welcome to Almanac North. Thanks for watching. Denny will be back next week as our extra COVID precautions wind down. But let's begin with the headlines. Duluth Mayor Emily Larson announced this week that the city's COVID mask mandate will be allowed to expire at 5 p.m. on Saturday. Larson had imposed the mandate in January as COVID cases spiked due to the Omicron variant. While businesses can now make their own decisions on masking, the mayor says masks will still be required at City Hall. Former Duluth and Superior Mayor Herb Bergson died this week at the age of 65. Bergson died from complications related to cancer surgery, according to a social media post by his brother, Brian Bergson. Herb Bergson was a Superior police officer before serving as mayor from 1987 to 1995. Bergson later served on the Duluth City Council and as mayor of Duluth from 2004 to 2008. The Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development announced grants this week for 2 northern Minnesota industrial parks. Grand Rapids received $250,000 for an industrial area expected to create 355 jobs. Nearly $1 million was awarded the city of Beauvais to expand its existing industrial park and create jobs for 2 businesses. And Cleveland Cliffs announced this morning it will idle its North Shore mining operations this spring, putting nearly 600 employees out of work. Cliffs CEO blamed absurdly high royalty fees and the use of more scrap metal in its electric arc furnaces for the idling. North Shore operations can include the Silver Bay Pellet Plant and the Babbitt Mine Pit. Well, it's a long journey from Bayfield County to the state capitol in Madison, Wisconsin, yet our next guest has been making that trip regularly for 12 years during her time in the Assembly and now the state Senate. Last week, she announced plans to retire at the end of the legislative session. Joining us now is State Senator Janet Bewley, a Democrat from Delta and the Senate Minority Leader. And Senator Bewley, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Well, thank you. It's great to be back here again.
Always nice to have you on the set. Why is this the right time for you to retire?
Well, first of all, it's right because as an individual and in speaking with my husband, we had thought about this a while ago. Mm-hmm. We thought about what would be a reasonable arc of time, and it could have been 4 years ago, but I decided to run then because 4 years ago was when my husband retired. But now, after 4 years of having him be retired and me not, I started to think that perhaps I could just possibly not run for re-election. And when I looked around and I realized that I have had a career always in the minority, that I could use this as an opportunity because I didn't want to go and have people feel regret for me. Mm-hmm. This serving in the minority has taught me a lot, and I'm grateful to have served the people, and I have no regret that it was in the minority. I wish I was in the majority, but I don't regret it because I've learned a lot, and it is time. If I had served one more term, I would have been 75 when I left, so this is the right time.
Mm-hmm. Are there political concerns as well with the district becoming more conservative? It did go to President Trump in the last couple of elections.
I think that we found that a lot of districts went to Trump that typically would not have. They have a stronger Democratic base, and I think that we're going to see that people are going to be returning to either their non-political or Democratic voting patterns. And throughout, we don't have our maps yet in our state, so the maps could make a difference, make it more red or more blue, but I'm not leaving because of the political makeup of my district. I wouldn't want my district any other way. The 25th has always been very diverse. It certainly gives you a lot of material for putting things together and finding solutions, but I'm proud of the diversity, and nope, it's not because of the political makeup that I'm leaving.
So you've risen to the Senate Minority Leader. Are you concerned at all that your departure is going to cost the region some clout?
I believe that right now people are looking for, in general, new faces, new voices. I know that there are people who are interested in this position that want to run for this job. And I don't necessarily, I'm not going to, anoint anyone or sort of declare, but I do know that the people that I know are interested will serve very, very well. And I'm in office until that person gets sworn in January of 23. So I am going to work very, very hard on behalf of all Democrats, and particularly all Senate Democrats, to get reelected or to take a Republican seat. And I'm also going to work hard for our governor as well.
Let's talk about the session. Wisconsin has a significant budget surplus, $3.8 billion. What do you want to do with that?
Well, the governor came out with what I thought was a very, very good plan. Number one, up against many demands for tax cuts because of a surplus, he's doing a rebate, which is something that Scott Walker did, and that will get money into the pockets of people who really need it. An interesting thing is that we have found that the money that has gone to families during COVID is not being spent on jewelry. It's buying things that they desperately have needed. Like if it's any durable good, it's something like a refrigerator, that freezer been broken, or food. The amount of clothing and things that people would always want to buy but couldn't. That's where the money went. And I think that bills are being paid. People are staying current. I think that ability to have people stay okay, that's pretty much what people want. They don't want anything big, and they just want to know it's going to be okay. Now, the governor is also going to put more money into daycare, because we know that daycare is a problem for many for returning to work. We don't have a huge population that's not working, but the ones that do, it's about daycare. They can't get it. And he's going to be putting more money into the schools. And I think those are perfect things to do.
What do you think the state can or should do to help relieve the rising costs of goods and services right now in the state? Because, as you mentioned, there are families who are really struggling with inflation.
Well, the inflation part of it, of course, is a federal concern, and I know that a lot of the governors are getting together and have gotten together last month to talk about that very thing. And that's typically up to the Fed to determine what they're going to do about the usual tools for curbing inflation. But on a state level, the things that we can do are to make sure that our infrastructure for getting goods from A to B is in good shape, that our roads are good, that we've got the internet we need to be able to track shipments, that we have everything in place so that people can get the things delivered. When it comes to the prices, I expect that they're going to kind of stay a little high for a bit, but I do expect that they're going to go down. So again, it's get cash in the pockets of people through the surplus funds, so that we can just hold on until we see that rate go back down again, because I really do believe that it will.
You mentioned infrastructure, and of course the federal government passed an enormous infrastructure bill. How will Wisconsin benefit from that? Will some of those projects that you mentioned, or types of projects that you mentioned, actually be addressed through that?
Well, we have an infrastructure need all the way from the big zoo interchange in Milwaukee that has been over our heads for a decade, and all the way down to town roads and culverts that need to be fixed. The governor wants to distribute that that money in a very reasonable way, so that the things that we have waited to fix can finally get fixed. Instead of just replacing a culvert, build a better bridge. For some of our port cities, and we've got quite a few, Superior being one of them, we have to make sure that they get the dredging, that they're strong, that we repair them. Fortunately, Superior has a lot of good, we've been able to keep them in good repair, but we always have to make sure that they're in the best condition that they can be, so that goods are going to come this way. Railroads. We have the possibility of getting the railroad in the middle of Wisconsin all the way back up to Ashland. It would be a game changer if we could do that. And I know our state is in communication with with Minnesota and with Amtrak on the Northern Lights Express, which I think would be, again, a wonderful asset for both Minnesota and Wisconsin.
As you look ahead to the rest of this session, are there one or two things that you really want to make sure get done so that you can leave and really, really feel good about your time there?
I do. There are some bills, but at this time of year, it's called silly season. We typically just pass dog and cat bills, nothing, no big, huge, because everybody's going to go running for election. They don't want to say anything that could hurt that. I want to end the session in a way that I can deliver a message to the people of Wisconsin that I want to see the beginning of the end of cynicism. I want to demonstrate, and I can demonstrate with my Republican colleagues, that we can disagree on how we solve our problems and remain true to our own values and disagree on those things, and we can do it civilly. And I have found that the majority leader in the Senate, Devin LeMahieu, we have just discovered that we can do it. Mm-hmm. So I want to let people know that if we can do it, so can the rest of them.
All right, well, on that note, it's a positive one indeed. Senator Janet Bewley, thank you so much for coming in.
It's my pleasure.
Appreciate it. Good. The Swenson College of Science and Engineering at UMD launched the Swenson Gender Equity Team this year to fight gender inequities in STEM fields on campus. Producer Megan McGarvey spoke to members of the team to learn why it is needed and about other measures to work toward an equitable environment on campus.
The Swenson Gender Equity Team, a group of faculty who are really committed to evaluating inequities and addressing those.
One of our big goals on the Swenson Gender Equity Team is really addressing pervasive implicit bias that exists at UMD, but it really exists all throughout academia, especially in STEM fields. We have in our society kind of a bias towards seeing men doing STEM work as opposed to women. And that manifests in small and large ways in the way that we do our jobs every day. And so one of our goals is to address the potential isolation that women feel in science and engineering.
There's 10 of us, there's advisory board, which is women faculty, and then there's the advocates, which are 5 male faculty. We take our guidance from the advisory board, so the advisory board reaches out to the faculty in Swenson. They take in all those inputs, and then we take our guidance from them as to, what is it that we should be doing, what is it that we should be addressing. If we are planning events and all, then does this sound like a good idea?
We also want to address some of the underlying bias that exists. We want to make sure that things like teaching assignments and workloads are done equitably. And so there's an effort to build this community on an individual level, but there's also an effort to address some of the structural inequalities that exist too.
Absolutely, I have implicit biases. You grow up with them. It's almost impossible do not imbibe some of that. And it can be difficult to uncover these or to learn these truths about yourself. It is important that men sort of take the initiative, that we say that yes, we recognize that we are enjoying these privileges, and so it should be up to us, and you know, not up to women to then say, you are enjoying these privileges, or you know, to educate us. It should be up to us to effect the change.
While we are called the gender equity team, you know, we really feel that these issues of inequities are pervasive throughout all kinds of identities. And it is really important to acknowledge that, you know, my experience, for example, as a cis white woman is going to be very different from someone's experience who identifies as LGBTQ or is a woman of color. I think we want to be inclusive of all of those identities, acknowledge the intersectionality of how different people's identities come together and shape their experience, and just work to acknowledge and support people as individuals.
If we have a diverse campus, if we have an inclusive campus, there's research showing that that already maximizes productivity, but the effects are more broad-reaching. I mean, they will extend to everyone on campus, so they will extend to students, and through these outreach efforts, they will also extend to the broader community that we are serving.
We have research showing that a resume that's this exact same resume, if it has a man's name on it versus a woman's name on it, people tend to rate the resume that's exactly the same with a man's name higher, more competent, even though there's no difference in the quality. So we're running an anonymized search, and what that means is that for all the faculty positions that we have, we've asked applicants to provide their materials in a way that we can't tell what university they came from, who they worked with. We are really able to really focus in on the important parts of what do they value in their teaching, what experiences have they had with teaching diverse students and students in STEM fields. So STEM historically has we don't have enough women, and we don't have enough people from marginalized groups, and we know that the future holds huge challenges, and we haven't tapped all of the diverse experiences that we have. We haven't tapped them all, and we need them to answer these grand challenges that we have in the region, in the country. So we're really facing some big grand challenges in STEM, and we need a workforce that's well prepared for it. And I think that the anonymized search really tells people that we're serious about it here, and we're making systemic changes in the way we do things, the way we do our work to create environments that are equitable.
The first anonymous search for the Swenson College of Science and Engineering started with 5 faculty searches. Once concluded, they will be sending surveys out to candidates for feedback that they will use to fine-tune this method. It's time now for Voices of the Region. Each week we hear from a journalist covering stories of interest in the Northland. This week our reporter is Marshall Helmberger from the Timberjay News in Tower.
We checked in recently with State Senator Tom Bach of Cook to find out, among other things, whether he plans to seek re-election this year. With the redistricting, which is happening now, all of the 67 Senate seats in the legislature will be up for grabs. And Bach's situation is a bit uncertain, given his decision following the last election to quit the DFL and become an independent. He'll likely face a DFL opponent if he does seek re-election, although it remains unclear if he'll face a Republican challenger as well. Bach said he's been working on that issue, which we take to mean he's been having discussions with Republican leaders in the Senate, in hopes that he can maybe dissuade them from putting up a candidate in his district this year. Now, the possibility of a three-way race combined with the uncertainty of redistricting certainly makes Bach's position as uncertain as it's been since he was first elected to the legislature back in 1994. Adding to the uncertainty is the situation with David Tomasoni, the Chisholm DFLer, who was recently diagnosed with ALS. He's already experiencing some of the symptoms of that fatal disease, which certainly raises doubts about whether he'll seek another term. And Bach had pointed out that the Iron Range has benefited significantly in recent years from its considerable seniority in the Senate, primarily given both Bach's and Tomasoni's long tenure there. And Bach worries that the region will lose considerable influence in St. Paul if both he and Tomasoni were to leave this year. Bach said he still has things he wants to complete, particularly, I think, the build out of the Lake Vermilion State Park, which he helped to create along with former Governor Tim Pawlenty. And as chair of the Senate Capital Investments Committee, Bach is in a key position when it comes to spending on state facilities such as the state park. And that's probably one reason that the governor included $12 million for the Vermilion State Park in his bonding proposal. And I suspect Bach will be pushing for that on the Senate side as well. We're also following up on the Blackwoods Blizzard Tour. That's a 4-day snowmobile ride that raises money for a Hermantown-based ALS research and support group known as Never Surrender. It was the 23rd such tour, and this year the 250 riders in the event raised a total of $1.6 million, which is really amazing. Fortune Bay Resort Casino on Lake Vermilion plays host to the event on one of the overnights on that tour. And so we've reported on them before, but this year there was another local connection. As I mentioned earlier, David Tomasoni was recently diagnosed with ALS, and that prompted some members of his family to take part in this year's Blizzard Tour. In fact, Tomasoni's daughter-in-law, Tiffany, was the tour's Rookie of the Year, single-handedly raising over $11,000. So ALS activists say they're more hopeful than ever of finding a cure after the Biden administration authorized $100 million a year for the next 5 years for ALS research. That compares to funding levels of about $5 million a year as recently as 3 years ago. We're reporting on the Ely Winter Festival, which began February 3rd and runs through this Sunday. It's Ely's biggest wintertime event, and it's largely back to normal after a scaled back event last year due to COVID. The snow sculptures in Ely's Whiteside Park are always a big attraction with works from both amateur and professional sculptors. If you haven't been to Ely to see the snow sculptures before, it's definitely worth the trip. And while you're in town, you'll definitely want to take in the Art Walk, which features dozens of Ely area artists whose works are displayed in the windows of area businesses. There are also some indoor displays, and in either case, you'll certainly want to check out some of the Ely businesses, if only to warm up. It's supposed to be pretty chilly this weekend, but that would be a good reason to check out some of the great places to eat in Ely while you're there.
Well, as we touched on earlier in the show, COVID cases in the region are declining after spiking to their highest levels last month. Local hospitals and schools are experiencing some relief while remaining vigilant. On Thursday, officials in Itasca County talked about what they are seeing in their communities.
Just to give you a quick snapshot in time, we currently have 6 COVID positive patients out of 18 here at Grand Itasca. Over in Hibbing, we have 5 positives out of 13 total acute care patients. These numbers change, of course, by the hour, but just to give you a little bit of a snapshot in time, we are still experiencing pockets of capacity crisis, which means we're struggling at times to transfer patients out of our hospitals to a higher level of care. We currently have 4 boarders here in our emergency room in Grand Rapids, 3 of which are waiting for mental health beds, 1 waiting for an ICU bed. This week, we've We've seen some beds opening up out there at those next level facilities in Duluth and the Metro, which has allowed us to get some patients out to specialists faster.
Though it's more complicated, I think kids are back at the center of this. And we talk about this all the time, about the goal being the overall health of a student versus is it just the virus? And some schools have shifted to a philosophy of it's trying to do what's best for the kids, which means we need to keep our kids in school. Everybody's done that. That's our primary focus because we know it's the best place for them. And that's been our primary goal. We get there in a little different way. Each of our schools gets there in a little different way, but ultimately we're trying to keep our kids in school and not give them reasons not to go to school.
So the stress and burnout of our frontline workers is real, and we're hoping to see a prolonged decrease in this surge so we can give staff some relief and time to focus on restoring their energy and frankly their passion for healthcare, which, as you can hear on the news, is dipping for a lot of folks in our industry, because our employees really are our greatest asset and we need them. Our community needs them.
We're out of time, but you can keep up with our show by following Almanac North on Facebook and Twitter. Check out the WDSE website for program updates, news about the station and upcoming events, and download the PBS video app to watch your favorite PBS programs anytime you'd like. And for those of you who want to keep up with the Minnesota legislature, tune in to the Minnesota channel for gavel-to-gavel coverage of floor sessions and committee meetings. Thanks to our guests and to the crew here in the studio. I'm Julie Zenner. We'll see you next time.